Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bay Bolts channel. My name is Michael Wax, joined with Jake Ricker and Philip Wunderlich. Guys, the NHL season is upon us. How are you guys doing today? Phil, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Ready for hockey to start back. Only a few more days now, so I'm really excited about it.
Jake?
Right around the corner, Michael. Super excited for this, ready to get underway. I think Tampa's got a really good shot this year. Obviously, being defending Stanley Cup champions, super excited about that. So looking forward to the season, ready to get things going.
Always got to plug the Stanley Cup champions in every single video that we do.
Absolutely.
And so for this video, because Tampa is in a different division, because normality is not the name of the game this year, they will be in the Central Division in the 2020-2021 season, along with 7 other teams, not in alphabetical order. Those teams are Carolina, Nashville, Dallas, Florida, Columbus, Detroit, and Chicago. Gentlemen, we are about to do our standings predictions for this Central Division. Phil, why don't you start us off for your number 8 pick, the last team in the Central Division?
I don't have a lot of faith in this team. They finished last year, and I'm going to say Detroit. I don't have a lot of faith in them. They don't have a lot of depth. Yeah.
Jake?
I've got Detroit in last place as well. But you know what? I think that they are going to be better than most people think. They just picked up a couple of veteran guys we saw from the trade with the Lightning, getting guys like Coburn and Paquette. I think that's going to help them out a lot. Do I think they're going to be, way, way better than they were last year? Probably not, but I could easily see them being a team that potentially gets maybe even 7th in the division instead of last place. So even though I have them last, I think that they're a team that is going to do better than projected. I have them like in the maybe 30 to 40 point ranges, I would guess.
Yeah, and while that is a low point total, I could totally see where you're coming from. They're probably not going to be as bad as last year. I don't have them as bad as last year. I actually don't even have them last in the division. Chicago Blackhawks are going to be the number 8 team in the Central Division for my accounting. They are a complete mess right now. They have no true starter. Malcolm Subban and Colin Delia are both backups as far as I'm concerned, so they have no true number 1 goalie. Jonathan Toews, their captain, is going to be out for a while. They have no Kirby Dach because he got injured in the World Junior Hockey Championships. Their defensive core is extremely poor. And, as much as I love Slater Cuckoo, he's not a top 6 guy anymore, and they still didn't get him back because he was a better part of their defensive core than what they have now. Their bottom 6 is extremely bad. I have them finishing around, 35, 40 points as well. I just can't see them doing anything more than that because they have no defense, no goalie, and no depth.
Yeah, that brings me to my number 7th one, and I say Chicago as well. Even these veterans are starting to fall off. I mean, Patrick Kane is Patrick Kane. You can't, expect too much less of him because he's a really great player. But other than that, they don't have a lot. And like I said, Kirby Dach is going to be out, and Jonathan Toews is going to be out too. So that's really hurtful to them. And they don't have, like you said, they don't have a real starting goalie. So that's why I have them in my 7th spot.
I also have Chicago in my 7th spot as well. Michael, I'm right there with you. I don't think that Chicago is going to be good as they have in many years past. They're definitely depleted on a lot of sides, as we just mentioned. You guys heard a couple of times. A lot of players that aren't going to be playing for them this year, which is going to hurt a lot. They do have Patrick Kane, though, who is a very good superstar, obviously, for obvious reasons. So, I think that'll help them out a lot. But again, as I mentioned before, I could easily see Chicago finishing last in this division, depending on how things go. Another thing I think we should mention here too is that, this season's going to be crazy. We don't know how many of these guys may end up testing positive for COVID in the middle of the season. We could see a lot of teams lose a lot of superstars very quickly, and a lot of this can change. So it's this is going to be a hard season to predict where they're at, but I think it's fair to say Chicago and Detroit are both going to be on the lower half of these divisions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Chicago and Detroit being on the lower end of the division. Detroit is my number 7 team. They're not as bad as last year, but they're still not great. They have people like Bobby Ryan and Vlad Domestikov back. God, I love me some Vladdy. I have one of his jerseys. But it's not really filled with the depth that you want. It is filled with NHL quality players, giving those prospects time to develop, but it's not really filled with the depth that you need on the forward side of things. Their defense is terrible from 1 through 6. It's absolutely horrible. One thing I am interested to see, because Jonathan Bernier was really good in Detroit last year. He actually propelled them to more wins than he should have. I'm interested to see how Thomas Grace is going to do outside of the Barry Trotz New York Islanders system. You know, we saw him in 2016 in the playoffs when the Lightning faced the Islanders in the second round. He was not very good that year. Then he sunk even lower, but then Barry Trotz came around and revitalized his career. Well, Barry Trotz isn't in Detroit. So I'm very interested to see if he continues with his upward momentum like Robin Leonard did, or if he falls off to his previous Islander days before Trotz.
Yeah, and you know they don't have a really good defense either in front of them. So, but that brings me to my number 6 pick, and I say the other Florida team would be the Panthers. You know they did add a lot of depth, but I don't think they added enough to really compete. You know, losing Trocheck was really big. I'm really high on that guy, but that's going to be hard to fill. And yeah.
I have actually Columbus in this next spot at number 6. I think Columbus, you know, is a team obviously that made the playoffs last year. I think they're still a very good team. I think this middle of the pack here is going to be very close. I could easily see these next couple of teams switching up and down a couple of spots, you know, because I think these are within a couple of games. I think all these teams are going to sit. But I've got Columbus down there. You know, I think I don't think they've been able to get the extra piece that they've needed to put them over the top. I don't think they did that this offseason. They've continued to lose some of their top guys that they've had in past years that made them the team that they were. So I got Columbus right around the 54-point mark. I don't think they're going to be that great this year, but again, I think this middle of the pack could be very close here.
I mean, we saw last year with Columbus, they had no true star, and that still got them to the playoffs against the Lightning. I think that has all to do with coaching. So as long as they have the correct coach in there, they have a shot at the playoffs. You know, I do have them at number 6. I don't have them making the playoffs, but I think they're going to be very, very feisty when it comes to trying to get that third or fourth spot. You know, for them, it all comes down to goaltending. Eunice Korpisalo and Elvis Merzlikins were fantastic last year. If one of them falters, that's going to be a major problem for them. I love their additions of both Mikko Koivu and Max Domi, and their depth is very, very good, but they have no one really to push them over the edge when it comes to trying to push for the playoffs.
Yeah, you know, I'm kind of opposite, guys. I have them on my number 2 spot, but going number 5 is going to be Nashville Predators. I don't have a lot of faith in this team. I never really do, honestly. And it might be a little biased because I'm not the biggest fan of Brian Johansson, but yeah, number 5.
Well, in my number 5 spot, I've got the Florida Panthers. I think the Florida Panthers are a team that's continued to improve year in and year out. They continue to add new pieces every year. So I think they're continuing to get better. So I've got them at 5th around the, I'd say about 58 points mark. Again, middle of the pack team that I think could, you know, jump up and down any couple of number of these spots. So there's a lot of good teams in this division. You know, it's something originally I thought the Lightning would kind of run away with this division and it wasn't that good. But then upon looking into it, there's actually, you know, a lot of decent teams in this division, I think. So Florida's at my number 5 spot, but you know, a team that could definitely surprise a couple people if they can get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I also have Florida at my number 5 spot. They're one of those teams that I keep thinking is going to be better than they actually are. This year, I've had them a little bit lower than normal because I'm thinking lowered expectations might actually get them into a playoff spot. They won't make the playoffs again, just like Columbus, but they'll be in the fight till the last maybe 2 or 3 days of the season. Again, Sergei Bobrovsky has to be better than he was last year. A 900 save percentage is not going to cut it, especially when you're playing above 50 to 60 games. The loss, not only, as you mentioned, Phil, of Trocheck hurts them, but the losses in free agency of Dadonov and Hoffman also hurt them as well. I do like a lot of their additions as well, though. Patrick Hornquist coming from the Penguins, Alexander Wenberg coming from the Blue Jackets, Carter Verhaeghe coming from the Stanley Cup champions, and Anthony Duclair coming from the Senators. Those guys should help a ton. I think their depth on forward, at least, is a lot better than it was last year. That being said, their defense is not great. Their number 1 defenseman right now, you could toss up between Keith Thiendo and Anton Strawman. Both those guys are in their mid-30s. That's not exactly what you want when it comes to a defenseman. So at least a number one defenseman. So they are my number 5. They're just missing out on the playoffs. If Sergei Bobrovsky's a lot better, they're going to make the playoffs, but it really depends on him.
Yeah, I think you're missing Aaron Ekblad, which is another one that I think he's a true number one defenseman. But other than that, like you said, it really drops off from there. And so number 4 for me is going to be Carolina. I don't think they lost too much in the offseason. They lost Sami Vatanen, but other than that, they didn't really lose much. So that's why I have them at number 4.
Well, at number 4, I also have Nashville as well, but I think this is going to be the number 4, number 3 spots are going to be really, really tight for these next 2 teams that I'll mention later on. But Nashville, I still think is a very good team. They're one of those teams that tend to sneak in a lot when it comes to the playoffs. I think Nashville will be a pretty decent team though. And, again, this is a tough year to predict with everything that'll be going on. But Nashville is at my number 4 spot.
Yeah, so it looks like we all have differing people for our number 4 spot. I actually have Dallas, the Stanley Cup runner-ups, and that may shock a lot of people, but I think that one of the things that got Dallas to where they were last year was the fact that they had a 2-goalie system that got them so far into the regular season, and then in the playoffs, they really determined that Anton Khudobin was the guy. In the regular season, we're seeing more teams develop into that 2-goalie system. We don't know if Anton Khudobin's going to be the guy for 45, 50 games this year. Ben Bishop's health is still in question. We don't know if he's ready to go. And if he is ready to go, we don't know how long he's going to last. Their scoring has continued to be problematic. They scored a lot in the playoffs, but were one of the poorest scoring teams in the regular season. Their defensive core is fantastic with the likes of Klingberg and Lindell and Heiskanen. But I think they're not a great team. They're a good team. They're going to make the playoffs, but they're not a great team.
Yeah, I had them on my number 3 spot. Like you said, with the whole 2-goalie system and with the questions about Bishop and how truly healthy he is. And speaking of health too, you have Tyler Seguin out for the majority of the year probably. So that's really huge, and especially in how well he did in the playoffs. So losing a top goal scorer for them, I think it's going to be too problematic, and they might even miss the playoffs, to be honest, because of that.
I wouldn't go as far to say that they're going to miss the playoffs, but in my number 3 spot, I've got Carolina. I think Carolina is going to be a very good team this year. They've continued to show that they've gotten better and better. I mean, heck, Sebastian Aho alone could probably take that team on his back and get them into the playoffs by himself. He's obviously a very, very excellent player. And, that team does something that I think very few other teams can, is that they truly do have fun. You see all the things they do on their social media team, and all the storm surge they do after. I think that's a really important aspect that you need from teams, is if you're having fun out there and playing your best hockey, I think that's going to show, and going to show in the standings as well. So Carolina's a team I could see finishing around 3rd, but again, they're close to that middle of the pack team that I think is going to be really close.
Yeah, as far as the end of our middle of the pack teams go, I have Nashville at number 3. Their defensive core is still really good. Their top 4 of Yossi Ellis, Ekholm, and Dante Fabro. Got to rep the BU alum. Their top 12 is solid on the forward group. It's not great. There's no really, true star. You could say Matt Duchene. You could say Philip Forsberg. Those guys are really like 60-point guys and you need that 70 to 80 to 90-point guy to really be considered a star of a team. I do really like their additions of Luke Cunnin and Eric Holla. Their goaltending duo is pretty good if Pekka Rinne decides to show up and have one of his good years, because it really does depend on the year, whether or not he has a good year. I love UC Saros as backup. I think they're going to be firmly in the playoff conversation. They will have to fend off other challengers, but they're going to be in the number 3 slot.
Yeah, and number 2, I have Columbus, like I mentioned earlier. With the addition of Max Domi, I think he's really going to fill a role for them. And not only that, but, they just signed Pierre-Luc Dubois, which I think is a very underrated player. So I think that they're going to be at number 2, right behind us.
I've got Dallas at number 2, and I know you guys were kind of down on them a little bit, but to me, they obviously made the Stanley Cup Finals last year. I think that shows a lot about their team. And yeah, there are questions about Bishop, and who knows how well Anton Hudobin can really take over that number 1 role. But I think anytime you get a team that can make it all the way to the finals and relatively keep that team intact, I think that they're going to fare pretty well, especially in this division, which I don't think is the strongest division by any means. I think Dallas gives these teams a pretty good run for their money, and I've got them around second place.
Yeah, I do think Dallas is going to be, fine. I think they will make the playoffs. I just don't see them as one of the top tier teams in the division. And this one may surprise you because I know both of your guys' number ones just by process of elimination. I have Tampa Bay at number 2, which, does not make a lot of sense. They just won the Stanley Cup. They have relatively the same team. Why do you have them at number 2? Well, that is a factor of I think the number 1 team got better than they were last year. And I really think that the losses of both Kevin Shattenkirk and Nikita Kucherov are going to hurt them in the long term. They now no longer have that power play two defenseman type role that they had last year, where they had Sergachev and Shattenkirk on the same defensive core power play. They are going to struggle when it comes to their third defensive pair. Sergachev is great, but now he's partnered probably with Luke Schenn or Cal Foote. Cal Foote not really impressing in camp to earn that starting spot. And Luke Schenn, I can't really say anything other than he struggled last year. He was not very good last year. So overall, I do think Tampa is going to be a good team. I think they may even touch the echelons of a great team. But in terms of winning the division, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you're going against the grain a little bit. But number 1 is going to be obviously like Tampa Bay. You do mention a good point with having Kucherov out. I mean, he's our top goal scorer, like I said, with Dallas and Sagan. It's going to be a key injury to really watch out for. And then you have the questions of Johnson. You don't know how well he's going to be mentally with all this stuff going on in the off season. And like you said, there's really a hole in that right side, the fence. But I do think that they're going to, be competing for that another Stanley Cup. At least I hope so. I'm a little biased, obviously, but
you guys are crazy. I think Tampa's going undefeated and run away with this division. No, I'm kidding, obviously. But I do think Tampa Bay will win the division again. As Phil mentioned, bias, but I think obviously Kucherov is going without Kucherov, that's going to hurt this team. I think especially on the power play, just like we saw when we were without Stamkos for so long, I think the power play will struggle a lot on this team. But the thing about the Lightning that I give them a lot of credit for is their depth. I think they've got a lot of good players that could potentially step up and really help this team, which is why I have them as winning the division. Guys like Alex Pierre-Boulet, Mitchell Stevens, who's not exactly a newcomer, but still one of those guys. Ross Colton is another one that I think we've seen a couple on of the lines in the mini camp that they're doing right now. I think those guys have a lot of potential and have a chance to show that they can fill these roles of the guys that they're missing from last year. And, I think as a team who is obviously the defending Stanley Cup champions, I think they're going to, really want to go out there and prove that they could potentially win a second one. That goes for any team who has won the cup before, especially, as a defending Stanley Cup champion. So I think there's a lot of young kids, though, that can step up big, and they're going to have to if the Lightning are going to want to win this division. Because as I mentioned, this division is a lot better than I originally thought. And I think a lot of people think.
Yeah, I, had Tampa when I was originally doing this as the runaway favorite, and then I really started to look at these teams overall. It's like, well, Nashville's quite good. Dallas is quite good. Florida, we always play weird, not necessarily tough. We always play weird against them. It's always some sort of overtime game or game-winning goal in the last second, or it's a complete blowout, like an 8-1 game. It's always a weird game against the Panthers. Columbus, we always play tough. As far as my number 1, I think this team is in the echelons of the great teams in the NHL, and that's Carolina. They are the best and deepest team in the division. Their defense core, their top 6 is utterly unbelievable. They had players that were in their previous top 6 in the regular season sitting in the playoffs because they didn't think that all their additions would, get healthy. by playoff time. And of course, we know what happened there in March. So they went out and they got all these fantastic defensemen in the trade deadline. And those guys ended up sitting in the playoffs. So they paid exuberant prices for guys that barely played. Those guys are now going to have a full season. Speaking of guys that are going to have a full season, Vincent Trocheck is going to have a full season. Martin Nikas is going to have a full season. I love, like I said, their defensive core. Their goaltending duo is good. It's not great. And I think that's their weakness right now. They have the forward depth. They have the defensive depth. James Reimer's a good goalie. Peter Mrazek is an average goalie. I think that's going to be their Achilles heel this season.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point for Carolina. I have them at third in mind, but I think they're obviously a very good team. They've proved that in the past. So again, as I mentioned before, these top couple of teams especially could very easily go up and down. And with how COVID is going to work and players possibly going out for multiple weeks, obviously a lot of this can change. I think this is going to be a very tight division. I think it's going to be a close race, and it's been really interesting to see who steps up and really takes advantage of this.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I do think that Carolina has a good team, so I hope they do well. But obviously, like I said, I do think that Tampa will take the division. It's going to be really tough, though, like you said, Jake. With the whole COVID situation, you don't know if people are going to have to quarantine and all this other stuff. So it's going to be tricky. But it's hockey, so at least we're coming closer to it.
Yep. And so what all that tells me is that Detroit is going to finish first and Chicago is going to finish second because, let's just go random on it. Guys, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for watching our 2020-2021, really just 2021 Central Division Standings preview. Michael Wack, Jake Ricker, Philip Wunderlich. Guys, again, thank you so much for watching. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video. If you'd like, ring that bell for notifications. Follow us on social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Bay_Bolts. I know that's not on the page in front of you, but if you look in the description down below, all of those links are there. Make it very easy and very accessible for you all. Guys, again, I know it's my third time saying it, but thank you so much for watching. We can't wait for the Lightning's first game on January 13th against the Chicago Blackhawks, raising the Stanley Cup banner.